All right, you heard the magic words, recordings in progress, and it is 11 o'clock Eastern here on the East Coast. Good morning to all of you joining us for our DOE Energy Awareness webinars. It is, for those of you watching it later on, the recorded version, Tuesday, October 26th, 2021, which means we have just one more after this one. But just a quick reminder, this call is being recorded, so if you don't want your voice, picture, all that recorded for posterity, then keep it off. Otherwise, now you know. Please move on to the next slide. We are talking today about, well, we will get into this first. Turn it over real quickly to Eli Levine, manager of the Better Plans program. Oh, well, yes, I'll introduce myself when we come back. Eli, you all ready to talk about the Better Climate Challenge?
Sure, I feel like the infomercial that you have to sit through before the program can start, but thrilled to be with you here today. It's been great to see all of the turnout across all of these different webinars. Happy continued Energy Awareness Month to everyone. One thing we did want to raise awareness about, so Better Plants for all of this time has been asking folks to work with us towards ambitious energy, water or waste reduction goals, and we are venturing into the carbon space. So we have a new Better Climate Challenge where we are asking partners to set portfolio-wide reduction in carbon of 50% over 10 years. For those energy-intense sectors, that can be 25% in 10 years. You can go back and set an earlier baseline if that's amenable for your existing corporate carbon goals. So next slide. But we are really excited about this. Not only does it help us move towards the important topic of decarbonization that so many of our partners are already starting to think about, but it's really a way to expand our partnership with so many of you and expand the ways for DOE to work with you and to expand our technical assistance. So we want to work with you not only on showcasing what leadership is, demonstrating successful pathways, but the technical assistance that we offer, as well as that peer-to-peer learning collaboration aspect that makes Better Buildings and Better Plants so special. Next slide. So what do we ask? We want you to commit to reducing your carbon emissions, to continue to pursue energy efficiency, participate in our working groups so you can learn from each other and get the most out of the program, and then continue to share your data with us. And in return, we will provide robust technical assistance and tools and training and resources, as well as facilitating peer-to-peer learning and providing national recognition. So next slide. So if you're interested in any of this, and I really hope you will be, there's ample reasons for you to be interested. Not only is it good for your organization in the future, but all of these other resources below. There's no cost to participate, and we hope that you'll do so. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me, the Better Plants team, the broader DOE team. Thank you for considering this. Happy to answer any questions you might have about it later, offline, or whenever. So I appreciate, Pete, for you making the time for us just to raise awareness about this, and I will turn it back over to you for the webinar at hand today.
Thank you, Eli. We are really excited actually about that expansion of the work under our Better Buildings and Better Plants programs for the Better Climate Challenge. So please, if you have any interest at all, as Eli said, reach out to him, or if you're already part of our programs, to your technical account manager. It is, as I said before, Energy Awareness Month. And what I didn't say before is I am Pete Longwa, Program Manager in the Advanced Manufacturing Office here with the Department of Energy. I work on our education and workforce development programs. And as it is, if you're tuning in to this webinar, you are probably one of the 10 million people working in manufacturing in the United States, or closely aligned with somebody who is. And to that end, we understand that it is the skills and the innovation of those people that are going to drive into our manufacturing industries in the next decade and beyond to be robust, as well as conserve energy. While it is Energy Awareness Month, I give you permission to be aware of your energy all the time. And thankfully, we have the experts from the Better Plants program to help us be more informed about how to do that. We've had a number of webinars already. You can check out the recordings of those on the Better Building Solution Center. We got one more to go. So if you are watching us live, That'll be on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can check out yesevents.com/energy awareness to sign up for that. That is yesevents.com/energy awareness. The one today is understanding your water bills. I will say for the last couple we've had about understanding those sorts of things, your electricity and natural gas. To me, and I'm trained in this sort of stuff, it seems needlessly complicated, which is why I am glad that we have the experts here with the Better Plants program to help us understand it and do better in terms of comprehending and using that information and the tools to make your enterprise that much more efficient. Let's see, we will go on to the next slide. A reminder. So we got a pretty full hour with you today, but please, any questions you got for those who are with us live, put them in the Zoom chat. If I see something that's going to be relevant right away to speak with to bring up to our presenter, Alex, then I will do that. If not, then we will go ahead and talk about everything at the very end of our hour. If you want to learn more about all of this, there are information sheets and examples galore. Energy.gov/BBSC, that stands for Better Building Solutions Center, energy.gov/BBSC. And with that, I think it's about time to introduce our speaker. Pardon me while I switch over to another window to remind myself that Alex Potts is a research associate at Oak Ridge National Labs and a technical account manager for the DOE Better Plants program. She completed her BS and MS in industrial engineering from West Virginia University. Go Mountaineers! And she worked at the WVU Industrial Systems Center during that time, which is where we actually met for the first time. She's continuing her research in energy-intensive systems at Oak Ridge National Labs, and she's going to talk to you today about understanding your water bills. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Pete. That was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. So yeah, I just would like to say welcome to the webinar talking about the understanding your utility bills water version. But before we dive in, I really want to give a topical overview of the program. So I know a lot of you live today, or maybe you're watching the recording later, may have some idea about the program, but I just want to give you a brief little overview of what we do here at the program. So this is the Better Buildings, Better Plants program. And our goal here is to really help those manufacturers and other industrial partners improve their resource efficiency. So it's not just about energy anymore, right? So that was the initial start of all of this, is increasing your energy productivity and being more efficient with your energy. But slowly we have expanded our portfolio here at the program. So now we also include resources such as greater water savings, so working better with that water efficiency. We've moved on to include waste in that focus, as well as more recently, like Eli just mentioned, we're starting to focus on that carbon emissions reduction. So this is just a topical overview of what we're trying to help manufacturers and industry do to improve their resources. So some of the resources here for particularly Better Plants program partners, we do have 4 main categories of resources that I do want to talk about today, just for a moment. The first one will be the low cost, or I meant no cost, software and tools. So these are completely free tools and software to you. The most notable one would be the Measure software, where we have over 60 calculators available for our users, as well as full-on assessment modules. So you can analyze your particular system, whether that be steam or eventually compressed air, pumping and fan systems. We also offer our partners a no-cost tools equipment loan program. So that program, we will send you some equipment from our inventory if you ask, and help you find real data that you can work with towards setting your goals for your energy, water, and waste reductions. We also offer the Finance Navigator online. So that is a database to look through the financing opportunities to finance these projects that you find. And then finally, the no-cost resources and guides. So those would be guides just like this, understanding your water bills. So we have a plethora, and I will include the link at the end of the slides, so you can go and see what other types of resources we have to offer. The second resource category would be the training and education. So that would be in-plant trainings mainly is the one we like to point out. And we have conducted over 120 in-plant trainings to date. We have since then gone virtual with our trainings, and we've set up the trainings to be more of a course-like understanding where we meet for a couple hours once a week to do a deep dive on a system. And this is really to help your employee education and to make them aware of those energy opportunities or those water savings opportunities. We also have over 45 webinars completely available for you. So this webinar you might actually be watching after the fact, and this is one of the pre-recorded ones. So other than that, we have webinars from all types of systems, from compressed air to fans to baselining your energy. So that's always available to all of you. The second resource that we like to, or third resource we like to point out is that recognition aspect of the program. So we do offer a recognition nationally through the US. So that might be media online through LinkedIn or Twitter. That could also be finding solutions on the Solution Center where we highlight some of our partners who are doing good case studies or good implementation models. And we do like to recognize all of our goal achievers. That's the main, really good recognition there if you've reached your goal, and we'd like to point that out. The fourth and final category that we like to categorize our resources into would be the innovation in labs. So as Pete said earlier, I am at Oak Ridge National Lab, and there are 17 national labs across the US. And this really offers a plethora of technology and information to our partners to be able to help work with the national labs across the US. We also offer other things like lab technology days, where we will open up a particular lab and have our partners come see what's going on during that time. So for now, those are on pause, but eventually we like to hope to get back to that and invite our partners back to see what's going on in the labs. And that last aspect we like to mention is the field validation program. So this is a newer pilot for the partners, where we help them with some M&V on the new technology and equipment that they implement at their facilities. So most of our resources will fit into these four categories. As always, if you are a partner and you're interested about any of these resources or any of these particular categories, reach out to your TAM. They know all about them, and we're here to help you, right? So what does good leadership look like? So these are over 250 partners that are part of the program at the point. It's still growing all the time, and we have more partners being added. And this gives a great opportunity for networking up from different sectors or talking to other people in your industry. So these are really the leaders in that efficiency space. So today, that was a little about the program. So today, what we're really going to deep dive into is understanding your utility bills. So today, I'll be speaking on particularly water bills. And that's just one of the guidance documents, right? So this is part of a series. So this is the third in the series of 3 for your utility bills. We spoke about natural gas bills last week, really giving you the insight of how that industry works and where your costs are going. And prior to that, we also talked about electricity bills. So that's a deep dive on how your energy is really developed and made, and where your costs are going, and why do you pay certain fees, and how to help you save money in your utilities. So these are all 3 available online right now. Again, I'll put the link at the end for your availability. But it's a great thing to try and understand all of your utilities. So a little bit about the water guide in particular. So water bills can be a bit hard to decipher at times. So sometimes you'll get a very long bill with lots of line items, and you're not really sure why you're being charged a standby fee or a fire line fee or whatever it may be. And it can be very long. Other times it's very short, and they don't necessarily give you all that detailed analysis, maybe just a total of your bill. So really this guide is to try and help you find out what all those little charges are and how they add up to that total cost. Some charges on your bill may appear monthly. It might even be a yearly annual cost, but still something you should be aware of and something that you should know that's on your bill. We will be covering how these different fees are used and why you're being charged them, and where they initially come from and why they're being charged. And the guides overall will cover the basics of the water and sewer bills. I do want to clarify that this document that we've put together in our webinar today is for utility bill water, right? So water that you would receive a utility bill for from a municipality or from a private water company. This does not include that source water that a lot of manufacturers use. So if you are self-sourcing, that is not covered under this scope of this document. Rather, we're talking about a physical bill that you receive from your municipality or a private company. So to start, where is your water coming from? How is it produced, right? So water is a bit different than the other utilities we have looked at in this series. So natural gas and electricity are produced and distributed. Then they're used, and at the end, that's basically the end of the utility line, right? The energy is transferred into the product or moved somewhere else. And that's the end of that utility, right? For water, it's more of a cyclical path. It'll keep repeating itself over and over. So once that water is used and discharged, it will rejoin the cycle and be treated and reused over and over again. So you'll see here, this is referred to as the urban water cycle. So this is a bit different than what we learned about in elementary school, the water cycle. Rather, this is the urban water cycle. So where's your water going in the system? What are all the different stops? So you'll see that we start at the top of the cycle. We start with your source water. That source water can be rivers, it could be lakes, it could be ponds, right? Wherever that water is initially coming from. So that water is pooled into a water treatment facility from those local sources like groundwaters or rivers. Water treatment facilities physically and chemically treat that water to balance it and make it to a potable level that you can then consume by removing those harmful substances and those pathogens that may occur in that natural source water. That treated water is then distributed through a system of pipes and pumps where it is eventually reached by the end users, whether that be commercial, industrial, or residential. And those are who we consider the end user to be in this situation. After that point, the raw water that is used and dirty is collected via a sewer system and piped to what is known as a wastewater treatment facility. So you'll see we have a water treatment and a wastewater treatment facility. This is where the raw water is treated to a level that is seen fit by the EPA and can be environmentally discharged back into those local sources. So after it's treated and those pathogens and bacteria are removed to the EPA standards, it is then re-discharged and the whole cycle will start again. So again, this is the urban water cycle, and this is the whole cycle that your water will go through. So your cycle may be a bit different. So you might get water, some of them may be sourced groundwater by yourself, and you only get a certain percentage of municipal water. Maybe you collect your rainwater. Maybe you have a lake nearby that you are able to use or that you own. You might not have the same distribution system. You may have industrial water sources instead of regular municipal water sources. But overall, this is the same cyclical path that water will pass through over and over again. So we talked about the source water a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the treatment process. So you'll see that there's 4 main methods there listed. So we like to clump together coagulation and flocculation. And that method is more commonly seen in the water treatment rather than the wastewater treatment, but it's still there. So the way that one works is positively discharged chemicals are added to the incoming water and debris that neutralizes and negatively charges the particles in the dirt, and it causes them to bind together. And those are forming clumps that are called flock. So you'll see in that third image there, the flocculation image, that dirt is being clumped together and it builds these flocks, right? So due to that increased weight, that flock will then settle to the bottom, and that forms sedimentation, right? So it separates that flock and the water. That layer of sedimentation then goes through a filtration system. So once that flock is settled, the remaining clear water is routed through a filtration system. Several filtration systems are used in the industry, and they vary in composition and pore size. So the bigger the pore, the more that will reach through. The smaller the pore, the more it'll catch, right? Just a normal filtration that you think about. Common filtration systems include activated carbon, maybe reverse osmosis membrane, or a mixed media. So maybe you have sand, gravel, and charcoal, or I've actually seen personally a several combination, right? So I've seen membranes be used and then they'll go use the filtration, or vice versa. So you can have a variety of different filtration processes. The real goal of that filtration process is to remove dissolved and suspended particles such as bacteria, dust, and chemicals from the water. And you'll notice that it does go through quite a few filtration steps in some areas, and other areas might not be so rigorous of a treatment, depending on that local water. The next step that we really like to mention would be that water treatment step. So we call that disinfection. At this point, chemicals like chlorine or chloramine or even UV lights can be used to remove any of the remaining impurities. This helps protect the treated water from germs during the distribution to the end user. And it really keeps that water clean and tries to give you that potable water that you need. Or if it's a wastewater treatment, it cleans it to that EP level of environmentally safe water for the environment. The methods used in these steps will really vary depending on the local water and your geographical region in the country. So you're not going to have the same water treatment all over the US, right? So water on the East Coast will have different needs than waters on the West Coast. So there's different pathogens or different bacteria that have to be treated depending on that location. The methods used will also have a direct impact on the cost of the bill. So if you're in an area that has naturally more contaminants in your water, you'll need a more rigorous treatment. And in turn, that will cost more on your water bills, whether it's your sewer bill or your water bill. It will cost more if you have to clean it more. And that really makes sense, and it kind of goes hand in hand. So we've talked about some source water and some sewer water. So let's talk about your real water bill, right? So here's the example water bill that you'll see in the document. And there's some key things that we like to point out here on your water bill that you should look for. So the first would be the meter number. So this meter number is actually physically located on your meter, and it's a way to ensure that your meter is the correct one on the bill. Sometimes your facility may have more than one meter, and depending on your utility, you may have multiple meters on one bill, or you'll have a separate bill for each individual meter. It's really up to the utility in that aspect. The second value we like to point out would be that meter reading. So that's the actual amount of water that your meter was read at that month. You'll see that this one is considered an estimated usage. And we like to point that out because sometimes you'll get an estimated reading rather than an actual reading. And that's when they are able to kind of predict how much you're going to use. And then the next month or two, they'll come and confirm and adjust the bill accordingly. So in this case, it's an estimated usage and not an actual reading. The next one we like to point out would be that usage charge. So that's your consumption or your usage charge on your bill. So that's the incoming water to your facility and the charge that you're being paid for it. So this bill is very nice and very straightforward in that it puts the rate right on the bill for you. Depending on your utility, you may not have that rate directly on your bill. Rather, you might just have that $304 listed and not how they actually calculated it. In which case, you'll have to go back at your tariff and see what those values would be. That'd be the same thing for the sewer charge. Water is always separated into usage charge and sewer charge. You may have a different entity that you're paying. So you may have municipal sewer, but a private water. So you can have a mix of bills. So one bill may be sewer, one may be water, or like this one, it will combine the two. We also have a list of fees that usually are seen on your bill. In this case, again, this is a very nice bill that lays everything out that we made here. Sometimes these fees will just be clumped together and they'll say writers and give you the total rather than separating it line by line here. You'll see the ones listed here are your metering fee. Sometimes utilities will have a metering fee and a customer fee. Sometimes you'll just have a metering fee and sometimes you'll just have a customer fee. Really what that's paying for is for someone to come out and read your meter and actually look at that stuff. It also provides your general customer service. This one also has your fire line fee, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and a storm drain fee. So all these are additional costs that don't necessarily have anything to do with your volume of water. And then the final line item is taxes, fees, and penalties. So a lot of states will charge you state sales tax, depending on where you're located. And we will talk about state sales tax a little bit further on in the presentation about how you might be able to wiggle out of that, or maybe find an alternative to avoid those taxes. So I would like to show you some of these meters that we've talked about. There's really three main meters that we see in the water industry, right? So we have an analog meter, a digital meter, and a dial meter. So they're all three slightly different, but they all really will read the same number. Some are just more modern, some are cheaper, some are bigger. It all depends on what your utility uses and how they read their meters. So notice on the first one is the analog meter. The way this one is read is the last digit actually does not move. So that 0 in the red box will always stay 0. But instead, how you read that last digit would be that sweeping arm. So in this case, it's in between 6 and 7, the sweeping arm. So it'll read down to 6. So this meter would be reading 316426. So it's a little bit harder to hold on to and understand sometimes, but once you know that last digit does not move, it becomes quite easy to understand. The next would be that digital meter that has a solar cell to help power that digital LCD display. And this is the easiest one to read, right? We all can read this one. It directly puts the number right out there for you to read, quite simple. And the last meter would be the dial meter. And this is kind of similar to the analog meter, but rather each dial is reading a different tens place. So you'll see that the largest tens place in this one, it would be 100,000. And in that case, you would read each dial as a different tens place. You'll notice that all three meters are actually reading the 316,426 gallons is what all three of them are reading right now. And yet they all look very different. You'll notice that all three meters also have the units. So all of these say the word gallons on them. They also have low flow indicators, meaning that if you're able to shut down and not have any flow at your facility, and this would continue to move, that'd actually be a sign of a leak. So something else is still consuming water. It's really there to indicate that flow is happening, right? And that's just one way to look for leaks at your facility. You'll also have your meter number that I mentioned from your bill located on this meter. And then finally, the meter size is also commonly seen here. So you'll see on this one, we have 5/8 of an inch for that meter size. Something else we do like to point out is that depending on your meter size, it could also increase or decrease your cost. So if you have more flow and require that higher diameter of your piping, then that cost goes up, right? So meters are the main way we actually get those consumption charges. So water consumption or usage is the total amount of water that your facility uses to make products or has there for that comfort water. So that is your incoming water that you're being charged for. So that is clean water from the water treatment facility through the distribution pipes. Usually in the US, it is measured in gallons or cubic feet. A lot of times you'll also see in hundreds of cubic feet. So that will come out as CCF. So it's another common unit to see here in the US. The final thing we'd like to point out as well is that sometimes without a sewer meter, this value will also be used as your sewer volume. So even though this is technically the incoming water that is being read, if you don't have sewer meter or evaporation credits or things subsequent to that, then you don't actually have a volume. So they assume that this will be the same volume. So let's talk about sewer charges a little bit. So you'll see that this is the other portion of that urban water cycle. So after it leaves the commercial, industrial, or residential users, it is collected through those sewer pipes and that system to gather that sewer. and then goes to the wastewater treatment facility. So your sewer charges are actually used to fund the wastewater treatment, and that's why they separate it. So wastewater treatment is for your sewer charges. And like I said earlier, without a sewer meter, the sewer volume is assumed to be equal the incoming volume. So in simple words, water in equals water out in a lot of utilities minds. Depending on your industry, this may be pretty close. Your losses may be negligible and it not be worth putting in a sewer meter, in which case water in, water out works for you. But in other industries, so say beverage or food or chemical, right? You consume a lot of the water into your product. Your product is made of water. So water-based products are leaving your facility, in which case it might be worth looking into finding out about a sewer meter to help you avoid some of those sewer charges if you're not actually using the sewer. So that's the idea, is if the water is not going into the sewer, you shouldn't have to pay for that wastewater treatment for the water that's not there. So just something to keep in mind depending on your industry and your sector. So like I said, if the process consumes a lot of water, you can either install a sewer meter. The second option would be to apply for an evaporation credit. So evaporation credit doesn't always technically mean the water is evaporated. It just means that it's not going into the sewer. So some examples of that would be cooling towers. So maybe you're losing water from your cooling towers and your bleed off rates and such. So we do have an example. I will talk about that momentarily. But that's a great way if you can't get in a sewer meter. You might be able to find a way to get credit for evaporation credits. Depending on your utility, this could be just a little bit of extra data, right? Just a little bit of something extra, or it can be a lot of data and they need daily numbers or hourly numbers even. So if you're interested in those evaporation credits, I highly suggest reaching out for your utility and finding out what they require, because every utility is going to be a little bit different in their requirements. The final thing to know about sewer charges is some facilities can treat their own water. So I do know several of my partners actually have to treat their own water and then they discharge it into the local sources. To do that, they have to treat the water to meet the EPA standards. And this way they're avoiding that sewer treatment charges or possibly surcharges, which again, we'll talk about later. So I do want to go over a quick example for the evaporation credits for a cooling tower in this case. So to give you a little heads up or a little intro, right? A manufacturing plant uses chilled water for both process and comfort water. The chiller is water cooled and utilizes a cooling tower for heat removal. The plant will add makeup water to replace the evaporated water from the tower, and simultaneously it discharges the bleed off. So to maintain the appropriate concentration of those dissolved solids. So to help figure out if they can get evaporation credits, the plant monitors both the makeup water rate and the bleed off rate. So the difference between those two would be that evaporation volume. So because they have those two values and their utility is willing to work with them using those two values, they are actually able to apply for the credit. So how much do you think they would get for that credit? So the first thing we have to do is calculate that evaporated water volume. So we find that by, again, finding the difference between the makeup water and the bleed off water. And the difference would be the water that was evaporated. So in this case, you would have that 12,000 gallons a day minus that 4,500 gallons a day to give you a grand total of 7,500 gallons a day that is being evaporated from the facility. So from them, simple calculation, it's going to be that evaporation credit savings is going to equal your evaporation rate times that sewer rate, because that's avoided sewer cost in this case. And that's the way that this particular utility set out their evaporation credit program. So we just take that 7,500 and we multiply by an average of 30 days a month. So, you know, we'll 28 or 31. So we'll take the average of 30. And then that 3rd cents per gallon. And that will give you a grand total of $8,100 a year of avoided sewer costs. So this is really a great example that my colleague came up with. And it's something that's very useful in manufacturing to know about. Again, if you want to know more, I encourage you to reach out to your facility. So we're going to talk about industrial water and industrial sewer. So earlier on in the urban water cycle, I showed you that it was a municipality in that case that was treating the water, delivering the water, and then taking the raw water and treating it again. But in the industrial world, we do have something called industrial water. So this industrial water is not as rigorously treated as regular municipal water. The idea with this water is you might have a process that doesn't need as clean as water. So for a more non-sensitive product, so maybe it's using a quench water, right? You don't need super clean water for that. And because it's less rigorously treated, it's going to cost less than that municipal water. So you can actually save money by using an industrial water source. And depending on where you're located, your utility may have that source for you, or you may have to find a third party for that. The second part of it is industrial sewer, right? So this means that your water is industrially dirty, right? So it's more dirty than your regular municipal treatment center can take care of. So this means it's a longer and more involved treatment process at that treatment center. So this is used when water is too contaminated, right? So they can't take out all the chemicals and all the added pathogens or pieces of your product, right? So they have to outsource that, or they have a separate facility for that. Because it is more rigorously treated, it will cost more than the municipal sewer. That's just something to keep in mind, and we will bring that back up in a few slides. So riders and fees. Several other charges can be listed on your bill, and in a lot of cases, they'll have nothing to do with your volume of water or volume of sewer. They're just additional fees that you have to pay to help upkeep the distribution system, or to help pay for all those additional pieces. These are also called riders or modifications to your rate structure. So it may be an additional line item on your utility bill. These items are usually extremely descriptive and are used for a very specific purpose. So for example, a storm drain fee. That fee is actually calculated based on the amount of porous ground that you have around your facility. So the more you build, the less porous ground you have to retake the water, right? So the water cannot go back into the ground because you're building something on it. So to help offset that, the extra water has to go to the storm drains. So that storm drain fee is actually used to help upkeep the storm drain lines. A fire line fee would be a fee that you have to pay if you are if you have separate water lines for a fire. So for a lot of facilities, this is just in case water, right? So you shouldn't ever have a volume listed on your fire lines fees unless your fire line goes off, right? So that might be an indication of a leak, or your fire line fees may have been used in case of an emergency. So that fee is there to say that at all times you will be provided this amount of water and it's ready for you to use at a drop of a hat, which is a good thing. The third one, which I thought was a bit more interesting, was the standby fees. So there's actually two different vernaculars for standby fees. So first, a standby fee can refer to a fee that's imposed on undeveloped property. So you say you own a lot of property, right? In the anticipation that it will one day require potable water, sewer, or drainage. So it's kind of just saying, oh, you're getting ready to build, maybe we should go ahead and gather that charge so that we are ready for you when you're ready for the water. The first type of standby fee that I just mentioned, this is typically collected with your property taxes, but you'll see it is a standby water fee. It's typically not on your bills, but it can be on your property taxes. The second type of standby fee, it's similar to electrical demand response programs, right? So demand response being that too much demand on the grid and they have to have everybody off the grid so that they can divert power elsewhere. So you may see a standby fee in drought-prone areas or in rural areas where the majority of the local water is consumed by industry. So if you're in a small town that has lots of big manufacturing, you may see this fee. It happens in times where water demand is higher than the supply. The utility company can call what we call an event, where industrial consumers are instructed to reduce or stop their water consumption for a period of time. That way it can be rerouted to residential areas, hospitals, or emergency services. If you do have this fee, if you don't respond to a standby event, this is a penalty that's on your bill for not reducing your water enough to help support those emergency services. So that is a general standby fee. The last one I really wanted to point out in the document was the sewer treatment surcharge. So I spoke earlier of industrial sewer, where your water might be a little dirtier than municipal can handle. So a sewer treatment surcharge means you have dirty water, but the municipality can handle it with some extra chemicals and some extra treatment. So this may be you have too much of a particular metal in your water, and you'll be charged extra on that based on the amount of that metal in the water. So it's just an extra charge to help pay for the extra treatment that you're requiring of your municipality. So let's talk about non-water charges. So these are some things that aren't anything to do with water at all, right? So the ones we just mentioned, your storm drain fee, your fire line fee, your standby fee, all those still have to do with water, right? So some other charges you may see are not related to your consumption at all, not at all. These are normally fixed charges and they're built into your rate structure, but making sure you're on your right rate schedule can actually save you some money. And that's something we'll speak about a little bit later as well. Some charges can be avoided with just a little bit of planning. And we do like to point that out, that you should check your bill every now and then and make sure that those charges and those fees can't be avoided. So some examples would be customer fees or metering fees, late payment fees or insufficient fund fees. So those are examples of ones that can be avoided, right? So late payment fees is when you pay past that date. Sometimes papers get shuffled and you miss a payment, right? Or you're late by just a couple of days. So I can't tell you how many facilities I've seen that if they just scoot their payment method and how they do it just a few days, it would save them thousands of dollars a year. So that is something to keep in mind. Every now and then check your physical bill and see what's on there. The third one down there, that list would be local taxes and state sales tax. And I did mention that earlier, but I want to say that some states will allow that sales tax exemption for manufacturers. So if you can prove that a certain percentage of your water is going directly to manufacturing, depending on your state, you can actually get that tax removed from your bill. So depending on your state, so here in Tennessee, we're over 9%, that would be a 9% discount on your bill. So it's free money if you just apply and can prove that you need it. In some cases, that will mean you need a predominant use study. And that, again, is something you need to contact your utility about. Every state is a little bit different, but reach out. You never know. The next ideology here that we really want to talk about is the true cost of water. So if you're unfamiliar with true cost of water, this includes all of the cost per unit of water. And you'll see in this graphic here that on your bills, you'll see on the left a charge for your municipal water. So it's the water you receive on the incoming side. Or also the sewer water would be on your bills. But are you thinking about everything in between, right? So what happens after you get the water in your facility? Well, you might have to pump it. You might have to treat it more for your own process. Maybe you heat it, maybe you cool it. Maybe you do the wastewater treatment at the end as well as regular sewer water. So true cost of water is really the idea of the summation of the entire cost for that gallon that you brought into your facility. And sometimes this can be double or triple the cost of your water that's on your bill. They use this value, a lot of manufacturers do, to better evaluate possible projects and your cost savings. So you're not just saving your utility bill, you're also saving energy, right? So you save energy because you're not pumping, you're not heating, you're not cooling. So gives you a better macro understanding of that cost of water. I do want to point out that the Better Plants program has developed the plant water profile tool. And I have linked it here on the slides, but again, if you just Google PWPX, you'll actually find it, probably one of the first ones to pop up. This is an Excel add-in, that way it's very easy to use and very easy to download. And it'll ask you all this information about your water and where it goes, what happens with it. Do you have chillers? Are you using steam? It'll help you actually calculate that true cost of water while also helping you balance your water. So water balance for your facilities is also a very important part of this tool. So now let's move on to rate structures. So we talked about your sewer, talked about your water, and there is a charge, but what are those charges, right? So there's several common pricing options that you see in water. So one would be a uniform rate, where no matter your consumption, high, low, you're gonna have the exact same unit cost the whole time. The next would be block rates. So the first would be a decreasing block rate. So with decreasing block rates, the unit cost of water decreases as more water is used. After that consumption tier is full, usage moves to the next block, and it's a little bit cheaper rate. So the more you use, the more those tiers fill up, and then the cheaper it will be per unit as you keep going. This rate is most often found in rural areas for agriculture use and heavy industry in regions where water is plentiful. There's lots of water and they want to encourage that manufacturing and that agriculture. The second is the increasing block rate. This rate system encourages conservation by increasing the cost as more water is consumed. Increasing block rates are commonly found in more urban areas where the water supply is not quite plentiful. And you really use to help be more restricted on your water usage. So encourage that conservation of water. The next set is time of use pricing, and there's two main ones that we'd like to talk about. The first would be the drought rates. So the two most common uses are drought rates and seasonal rates. The drought rate is found in regions where droughts are experienced intermittently. So it's common for droughts to occur. So they build it into their tariffs. When rainfall is limited, the water in the cycle is lessened, and it requires those regions to conserve water. During drought seasons, rates are adjusted upward to discourage usage. And the important part of this one is the higher the level of drought, the higher the unit cost. And this structure is really meant to conserve water during those specific drought times. So again, the drought level will determine the cost. So it is a varying structure. The second time of use pricing is seasonal rates. Seasonal rates are similar to drought rates in that water costs more in particular seasons. Rates are usually increased in the summer in this one when less participation occurs, and a decrease in off seasons that have more or that regular precipitation. The rate is a little bit different in drought rates in the fact that it's either on or off, yes or no, rather than a varying level. And it has not necessarily anything to do with the drought levels, but rather, is there enough precipitation for the supply of the system? So I do have a quick example about decreasing block rates. So in this case, the manufacturer's total consumption was 524,300 gallons for the month. How much is their consumption charge using the block rate below? So you'll see in this case that we have a 4-tier block rate. Decreasing block rate. So you'll see as they go up in units, they actually go down in the cost per 1,000 gallons. So their total is 524,000 gallons. So as they fill up each block, they move to the next rate. So you'll see that column that says customer volume in block 1,500 and then 28. And then in block 3, they can't fully fill that block. So they don't go on to block 4. So instead they stop at block 3. And you'll see on that total volume column that volume does add up to their total volume, and it has the charges associated with each block. And then finally, to find the total cost for that consumption charge, you will just add all three of those values together. So in this 4-block system, they didn't quite fill all 3 blocks, and their total cost would be $3,582.64. So I also want to bring up calendarization. So I know this does seem like a long, fancy word, but it actually has great meaning, and it will actually highly impact your utility bills. So something to point out is billing periods will depend on when the utility reads your water meter. So they might not read it at the 1st of the month every single month. Instead, they might read it on the 5th of this month and the 8th of the next month. So that's something to keep in mind. Normalizing that water in sewer data for those billing periods is known as calendarization, like I said. And the way we find that is we divide the consumption by days in the bills and allocate the water to the calendar month. So say that you have 3 days in the next month. So we want to be able to shift that water so that your production and your water consumption line up so that it goes from the first of the month to the last day of the month. And to give you just a little bit of a graphic here, you'll see that the darker circles are the start dates for the billing period. So in December, that was the 19th, and then the 18th, and then the 20th. So they're all within just a few days, but they're all slightly different. So you'll see that in December, they're really having 30 days on that bill, and the January bill had 33, and the next only 24. And what we like to point out is that that isn't going to line up with your production values, right? So your production values are normally from the first of the month to the end of the month. So by doing this calendarization process, you get a better understanding of how your production is actually impacting your water. To learn more about calendarization, I would suggest checking out the baselining guidance document that we've produced and talked about earlier in the month. Also, you can feel free to contact your TAM and they can show you how to do this calendarization process. And then finally, to wrap up, let's talk about opportunities that you have for cost and energy savings. So how can we save money by just using your bills, right? So let's not change the volume of water, but just changing things about your bills. So that first one, like I mentioned, would be that sewer water metering. So let's avoid those sewer costs if we can and meter the outgoing water. So that one, it's not available for everyone, but if you think that your water is being consumed in that manner at your facility, this may be a very viable option. The second would be that evaporation credit that I mentioned earlier. Again, evaporation doesn't necessarily mean that water has been evaporated. It could be injected into the product, like I said, but it would still qualify for evaporation credit if you don't have a sewer meter. Every utility is different. Again, if you need help, reach out to your facility. I'm sure they're willing to help you. The third would be discharge water to the appropriate places. And what I mean by that is make sure only industrial water is being classified as such. So if you are using industrial water and you're discharging that industrial water, make sure you're only discharging the dirty water to that sewer. Rather, you can divert the comfort water that you're using, so sinks or kitchens, to the regular municipal water, and that would save you some money there. And on the flip side, use suitable source of water. So don't use municipal water if you can use industrial water. If industrial water meets your needs and does not affect your quality of your product or your process, look into industrial water. It may save you quite a bit of money. Avoiding late fees, like I said, sometimes that can be an immediate savings for you by just paying your bill on time. The next would be analyzing your water usage. This would be trending your water and seeing anomalies. So why is your water spiking in this particular month? It may mean a leak. It may mean poor practices somewhere that you can uncover just by analyzing your bills. The next one is that tax exemption. So you might need to do a predominant use study, like I said earlier for this one, but it will save you some money immediately. And then the final one that we recommend is every now and then just recreate your bill. Pull up your tariff, go through your charges line by line from your utility bill and see what's going on. There's one of three things is going to happen. You can either do the calculation and it matches your bill. That works, right? That's what you should get. That's what you want to see. The second option would be you realize that you're not on the right rate structure. So maybe you're being charged for large industrial when really it should be small industrial. And then the final would be the calculation error. There's something wrong, and then you would go to your utility and try and get that corrected. So these are the main ways to save on your water bills without changing that volume of water. So that is all I have for today. I did include the link down here on this page. So if someone would later like to go look at all the resources and guidance documents that we have, just look at the Better Plants Resource Library. I'm going to turn that back over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Alex. And we appreciate that. So we still do have a few minutes before our time is up. So a quick reminder, if you do have questions for Alex, then please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I will get us started, and we'll remind everybody here as we get to the very end about our last webinar coming up on Thursday, October 28th. Alex, it's not really relevant to what you were talking about, but I pulled out my physical bill for my house here, which is obviously a lot simpler than what you mentioned. But I did write down your note. Every once in a while, check your physical bill. Now, you talked about it here just in the last bit about recreating your bills. But when that happens, and say people don't do it very often, and they come talk to their account managers like yourself, what is the main thing, I guess, that surprises them, or the thing that you find out that, like, oh, you could easily make a change on?
So I would say a lot of people are charged their incoming water to equal their sewer water amount, right? So for residential on your bill there, your sewer water volume probably matches your incoming volume, which is normal for a residential place, right? But if you're using a lot of water in your process, that's something you have to consider. Your water might just be in your product, right? And you're being overcharged for that sewer if you're not careful. So that's the thing I would think that surprises most people, is to see those values equal each other.
Makes perfect sense. You did talk about things you can do without changing the amount of water you use. Now, obviously, certainly if you're on one of those rate structures where you're in a drought-prone area, or you have other considerations, you're probably thinking about, potentially, reducing your water usage. And then there's all those attendant costs that I really honestly hadn't thought of until right now. Is that something you guys work with people frequently on, in terms of understanding the full benefit that they might get by changing their water regime, if you will?
Right. For that, that's kind of out of the scope for this particular document, but the program actually will have some suggestions for water reduction. So this document actually focused more on not changing that volume, right? So just the utility analysis. However, using the PWP tool that I mentioned, you will get a better idea of, if you do reduce your water, how much will you actually save? So we do like to point our partners to that PWP tool to help them understand their true cost of water.
Thank you. You mentioned the different rate structures, and I will admit I'd never heard of a decreasing block rate, because that would seem, antithetical to conservation, as you brought up. Are those the sorts of things that individual entities can negotiate with the utility, or is it just kind of a given, this is the rate structure that the utility offers, and you're stuck with it?
So again, that would depend a lot on your particular utility provider. So if you are in an extremely rural area with not a lot of customers, that is something you can talk to your utility about. So bring it up, talk to them. They may have a different tariff that you can get on that would make more sense. So for you and I, as a residential customer, you get what you get for that. But for the industrial, there may be a little wiggle room. You just have to ask sometimes. So that would be my suggestion on that one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I will also say I had not really thought about the diversion issue in terms of your industrial water and how that's counted, or the industrial sewer actually, and how that's counted. Is that fairly typical? Is that something that needs to be revisited at a lot of facilities?
So not all utilities actually provide it, and it is not always available in all regions. Rather, it's something that's going to take a little bit of digging for your own region. So in that case, you might get water trucked off, right? So you may have water trucks that come and gather that water and dispense of it in an appropriate manner. But in other situations, you can have a completely separate sewer system attached to your facility, so that is discharged directly to the industrial sewer. Again, it is a very regional thing, and it is something only in the industrial sector, right? So it's not something we're going to see. But it all depends on your particular utility. But again, just ask. You never know until you ask. There's a lot of things hidden in those tariffs if you're not aware of them.
Great. Thank you, Alex. That's quite a bit to think about. And I will say kind of wraps up a 3-session series we've had here in terms of looking through your utility bills, both your electric bills and your natural gas bills, if you have those at your facility. So thanks again for all of that. I will point everybody out and remind what Alex mentioned for those of you watching this later on, especially. You can check out the recordings of our previous sessions, as well as find all the documentation that she was referring to and that other hosts have referred to at the Better Building Solutions Center. That is the Better Building Solutions Center on the DOE website. One last thing for those who are watching us live here on October 26th, we have one more event coming up on Thursday. That'll be 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find out more about that. It's in the chat box right now, the link to sign up for that. yesevents.com/energy awareness. yesevents.com/energy awareness. That one, I believe, will be lessons learned from our Better Plants goal achievers. So there'll be a lot of insight from what other organizations have done, maybe one of your organizations has done, that we will find out more about on Thursday. With that, thank you again. We appreciate you and look forward to seeing you on our last and final Energy Awareness Month webinar on Thursday. Take care and have a great rest of your day.